Here's a lady who thinks a lot of atheists just say that they're atheists to sound cool.
We all know Nietzsche's phrase, God is dead, and we kill him. Some became atheists after just hearing these misinterpreted quotes.
Like whom? Please name a single person who stopped believing in God because they heard that Nietzsche quote.
For me, those type of people are nothing but posers. Don't get me wrong, it's fine to doubt religion, but today, many will shut it down without knowing what they are shutting down. For that reason, I believe that for many, atheism is just a trend. A study carried out in the United States last year found that 29% of adults claim to be religiously unaffiliated, and the data just sharpens with Gen Z. Another study in 2022 showed that roughly 49% of young Americans claim to be atheist, agnostic, or have no religion at all. But this radical change in society, going from everyone believing to the half of the adult population not believing, what does it mean?
Are you asking what causes this, or are you asking what its consequences are?
Maybe they had a deep reflection on it, or maybe they're just following what everyone now considers the intelligent thing to do. I think some of the newer non-believers are in that position to be seen as rebellious by not following the convenient or standard thing. In that same way, as an independent individual, they will be seen as someone who has something to say, or as someone beyond ordinary intelligence.
But if they aren't really atheists, if they really believe in God, it sounds odd that they would knowingly put themselves in danger of hell just to look smart and edgy.
If we want to give this an example, I think the new atheism movement in the 2000s could work just fine. Although those who led it were intelligent and had a coherent argument on God's non-existence.
They used the term atheist in such a way as to include agnostics, but not all of them tried to argue that a God does not exist. They mainly focused on arguing that there's no good reason to believe that one does.
Most of those who followed it just thought God was dumb, and anyone who believed in him was someone who lacked logical reasoning. Disobedient and bold acts are always noisier and usually cooler. You probably know Richard Dawkins, but not many of us both. So, what is an atheist? Basically, and very broadly speaking, it is someone who does not believe in the existence of God or any gods. Which, yeah, that is atheism. But I think we should ask ourselves what the definition means by belief. That's exactly why philosophers and communicologists divide atheism into two branches: the strong or positive atheism and negative or weak atheism.
Do philosophers do this? In the peer-reviewed philosophical literature, it seems far more common to use the word atheist to refer to someone who affirms the non-existence of God rather than being merely agnostic. The definition of atheist that includes agnostics is a more common, non-academic use of the word.
Neither is bad nor wrong. Positive atheism claims that there is no God, while negative atheism just lacks belief in God. Philosopher Anthony Flew argued that we should take for granted that if anyone is an atheist, they are from the negative branch, unless they can argue their way out. For instance, Richard Dawkins has a whole book of 464 pages claiming that there is no God. That makes him a positive or strong atheist. In comparison, somebody who lacks belief and doesn't openly claim that there is no God, then that person is probably from the negative branch of atheism. With that being said, what is the distinction between agnosticism and negative atheism? Because they sound right about the same thing. Well,
the two terms are most often used interchangeably. I suspect that any specified distinction would be alien to most of the people who use those terms.
Agnosticism is simply not knowing whether there is a God or not, or being sure we cannot know. Even though the latter information seems useless, it matters quite a bit. And that's because atheism in either form isn't only rejecting God, but a whole worldview. Whether fully developed or in process, atheism must address questions regarding morality, meaning, and the nature of reality without relying on a creator.
Why? Unless an atheist is trying to convince someone that there is no God, or they're trying to convince someone that there's no good reason to believe in a God, why do they have to explain anything?
That is harder than it sounds. That's why many people will mistake being a non-believer for being spiritually apathetic. And what is spiritual apathy, you may ask? Basically, someone who doesn't bother or is too afraid to think about religion, morality, or big questions in general.
Insofar as such a person lacks a belief in a God, why would they not fit the definition of a negative atheist?
A spiritual apathetic person doesn't believe that there is or isn't a God, but rather someone who just doesn't care. The atheist already has some answers, or at least is thinking about them.
Why would that be the case if someone is a negative atheist?
The apathetic person, in comparison, never even doubted whether there were questions to begin with, and went straight to claiming the non-existence of God.
That doesn't sound like something an apathetic person would do. Why wouldn't an apathetic person just say they don't care whether there's a God? Taking such an affirmative stance doesn't seem very apathetic at all.
Atheism needs a conclusion, whether positive or negative.
Some people use it to mean that. Others use it to refer to people who don't believe in God simply due to ignorance of the concept. Folks who use this definition even count babies as atheists. This and all the other definitions are legitimate.
Just as theism does. But if the conclusion is a round definition or declarations like God is not logical and those who believe in him are dumb because they are not rational,
that also doesn't sound like something an apathetic person would say. Someone who says that sounds an awful lot like they care about people being illogical.
then that person doesn't truly reject God's existence, but rather bash those who do believe.
Why would they bash people who believe if they're not really even atheists themselves?
As I just explained, atheism is rapidly growing. And people who join in the trend just because it seems more intellectual are nothing but wannabe religious conformists.
Even if that's true, why would they do that if they really believed in God? They can't be very committed to whatever religion they secretly believe in if they're willing to hide their theism to look cool and hop on a bandwagon. I could understand hiding your theism if you live in a country where theism is persecuted, but why would you do it for a trend?
It is almost normal to send funny videos that ridiculize religion, but when someone comes with a counter-argument, they are dismissed as doing too much or being too deep.
I have not encountered this. I think she's had some personal experiences with one or two people like this and is generalizing this behavior to a huge proportion of atheists.
This is a problem because being too deep is sometimes very necessary, especially when talking about something so complex as the existence of a divine being. Not wanting to engage in these topics can have a significant negative impact on culture.
If you look at the countries that have the most blasé attitude toward the existence of a god, they seem to be doing pretty well. I'm sure you could point to problems they have, but relative to the most religious countries, they look like they're doing just fine. Are these countries disproportionately thoughtful about their atheism?
It not only affects changing beliefs every month because of what an influencer said, but it also makes humanity lose itself a little bit more by discarding centuries of thought as dumb or outdated.
Thoughts that people have had for centuries are frequently discovered to be wrong or obsolete. Should we all just pretend that they're correct just because they're old?
Neither theism nor atheism is cool by itself. But what one could label as cool is arriving with enough knowledge about their beliefs. The point of view doesn't matter, forget about it. Whether it is Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Agnosticism, atheism, or any other. The hard part about it is being able to honestly believe in it and knowing why you do so.
So would theists who don't really think about their religion not really be theists?
Not because it was like that since forever, or because it's dumb to think in any other way. It's fine if all the answers aren't there yet. But what matters the most is understanding why one believes what they believe. Sadly though, that's what most people lack. They may have all the information on the topic, have memorized all the verses, but they don't know why. And still, they get on the other side. It's easy to believe that the other half is always wrong. But honestly, a theist and an atheist that never wonder why they believe or don't believe are quite the same person.
And what kind of person is that exactly? If a person who lacks a belief in God and hasn't unpacked why they don't find the idea that God exists convincing is not really an atheist, and presumably a person who believes in God and hasn't really thought about why is not really a theist, what are they?
Sure, a theist may be inclined to tradition while an atheist to rebellion, but comfort is never a substitute for reasoning. Religion and the lack of it shapes society.
I think it's far more the case that society, especially its material conditions, shapes religion. I wouldn't argue, for example, that the well-functioning countries that are the least religious are well-functioning because they are the least religion. It could at least as easily be the case that they are the least religious because they function so well. People are less likely to solicit help from a religious community if they live in a country with a robust social safety net, for example. Many conservative Christians oppose social safety nets because they see them as a threat to their control over their congregations, and will hypocritically accuse governments of using them to control people.
If we only follow it because of tradition, or on the contrary, dismiss it as a rebellion to the system, the civilization may suffer from a collapse.
How do you figure? Can you give examples of this happening? And what do you even mean by collapse? That sounds like a country becoming a failed state. I've never heard of a country becoming a failed state because people adopted or abandoned religion without thinking about it very carefully. If that's not what you mean by collapse, then what do you mean?
Being an atheist just because everyone else isn't cool. It is an ignorant thing to do. In the same manner, being a theist just because everyone else isn't following a tradition. It is nothing but an excuse to not think about what is believed.
That seems like a thin distinction. Following a tradition seems often motivated by a desire to do something simply because it's been done for a long time.
Many people who proclaim themselves as atheists nowadays are merely following a trend, while not necessarily believing the issue. We should engage, question, and study what we believe and why, never taking a position as the absolute truth. Sure, you may have your own truth, but that's subjective, and you should respect everyone else's. So, basically, just to wrap things up, if you call yourself an atheist, be sure it is because of personal anecdotes backed up with research, conversations, and dialogue, and not just a taken out of context phrase of Nietzsche.
Please name a single person who became an atheist or claimed to become an atheist because they read Nietzsche saying that God is dead. To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.